Last time on Anchor Bay. We carved a bunch of mountains out of foam and made lots of little foam chips. Now it's on to some really neat bridges. As seen in the original drawings, we've got at least 4 bridges to build. 2 crossing the river on this end of the layout, and 2 curved wooden pile trestles on the other. One spans the river, the other clears the main line as it glides over itself. A wooden how truss span with approaches made from wood pilings as well. Then over on the other side of the layout, a lovely small plate girder bridge in front of a waterfall. We'll start by carving the river valley as it comes out from under a 5th small concrete arch bridge made from a scrap of blue foam. The entire hillsides were carved first and then covered in a layer of sculptamold, leaving a couple of exposed foam areas for rock faces. The other trick of this mountain is that it can be disassembled to access the track beneath. My client specifically does not want to have to get under the layout for any reason due to his knees, so we opted for a lift-off scenery section all throughout the layout. The lower edges of the hill in the corner are layer-caked from 1-inch foam sheets. They use a wedge shape to nest perfectly back into the shape of the hillside every time. The top of the mountain is an experiment using Woodland Scenic's Shaper Sheet. I remain skeptical that it'll perform the way I want, but I'll give it a try. It looks to be an unusual 2-layer product with felt on one side and heavy aluminum foil adhered to the other. It looks like some sort of industrial roofing or siding product repackaged for hobbyists. You rub a layer of plaster onto the felt once you're done shaping the sheet into the form you want. Then it dries and hardens. For the top of this hill, it allows it to be lighter to lift off, but once it has scenery on top of it, I wonder if it'll actually be light at all. My client mentioned it might be nice to have the train go through a cut at the base of the steep hill. I thought it was a nice idea, so we used cardboard strips and leftover foam to make it taller. Once that was done, it was time to see where the how truss bridge abutments were going to be. We also had to figure out how long the pile trestle approaches needed to be. Next, I cut rough test pieces out of foam to represent bridge pillars. Also confirming the bridge was level in all axes was important. Then I put in the first bridge approach. Next, I decide rather than buy commercial bridge abutments, I'll give carving some fieldstone ones to match the 19th century bridge a try. I thought it might be fun. So a little while later, using a box cutter and a dead ballpoint pen to burnish the stone texture into the foam, we had some nice abutments. I purchased 2 Walther's trestle kits to kit bash all of the trestles we'll need today. It's probably Walther's best kit for kit bashing I've ever used. The different types of trestle bends, beams, and other detail parts that come with it allow for an immense amount of flexibility, as you'll see here. The first installation went a bit overboard, excavating it out for all the bends. I did this primarily because I needed them to actually support the weight of future steam locomotive models. Using scrap pieces of foam from earlier landforms, I filled it all in. I checked the alignment of the approach to make sure it fits and clears any piece of equipment you could run on this branch line. The next bridge was more of a challenge. It was not only on a curve, but it also had a 2% uphill grade. The bridge kit ostensibly is only designed for a straight span, but as you'll see, we can bend it to our will. First things first, getting dizzy off of Tester's glue fumes, building all these bends. Do this in a well-ventilated room instead. Then came the test fits. The floor of the riverbed was notched out to accept full-height bends without modification. First I installed the bridge abutments that came with the kit. They have notches to accept the long beams that run underneath the track. Next, the beam that goes underneath the rails was bent into a 26-inch radius curve that matches the main line's curve. The beams are supposed to go directly under the rails themselves, so make sure that's the case when you modify yours. I added the trestle bends one at a time. I notched the beams that were too low to contact the bridge ties, so I used some leftover bracing from the kit to cap the beams with some more lumber as a shim. It passed the roll test with flying colors once it was installed. I then glued it permanently in place and soldered the joiners on both ends. Eventually, they were all installed with hot glue and allowed to dry. Next, I used microengineering bridge track, easily the best on the market. I sliced off the ties on both ends so that my entire span would have bridge ties only over the span itself, replacing the ones past either abutment on land to be normal ties. Next was the most challenging bridge of them all, the bridge over the main line as it loops up over itself. Now, this is both on a 2% grade, a curve, and on an easement arc, so it has a vertical clearance requirement in a non-perpendicular curved fashion. Boy, this kit is versatile. First, I removed a chunk of Woodland Scenic's foam risers and cork where the span would be. The kit comes with some steel beams, presumably for exactly this reason and for highways. Just like real bridges, I had to skew the pilings properly to clear the switch below, realistically staggering the beams. With the tacked-in assembly passing the clearance tests, it was glued to the layout. Next was a load test with a scale 184 tons of SD45 playing that role. This kit is remarkably strong when welded together with model glue. Then, using the remaining beam pieces, I filled in both ends. All the bridges got a coat of creosote-soaked brown paint for weathering in and around the trestles. Final bridge of all is this rather cute span from Exact Rail. It arrived beautifully painted and fully assembled. It took longer to carve the little waterfall than it did to install the bridge. This ready-to-run bridge comes with tie plates that accept most manufacturers' FlexTrack. I ended up using CA glue to attach the nickel-silver FlexTrack to the bridge. It looks perfect in what will be a lush coastal redwood rainforest. Next, it was adding Sculptamold to rock formations we carved in the previous episode. You'll want to subscribe to the channel and watch future episodes of Anchor Bay as they come out. In preparation for a holiday party, we cleaned up the layout to showroom status. That meant moving a bunch of foam to the garage and a thorough cleaning. Work went quickly, and now everything was clean and clear. It was time to extensively test the main line. My client bought this antique MRC controller for us to do some DC test runs. It was in downright pristine condition in its original box for decades, and it worked perfectly. The little officer's special ran around the layout, efficiently finding every single track and rolling stock issue along the way. That was, of course, the entire point. Each fault was located while running across the whole layout in both directions in a variety of speeds. I'll mark the area with an arrow of blue painter's tape and then go back and fix them all at once. After a couple of hours, we found and repaired every single track issue, and it runs silky smooth, with even the longest equipment. For a final bit of fun, my client and I platted out the entire town using full footprint size cutout replicas of the future building kits we planned to build for the layout itself. A nice commercial strip facing the depot, with residential areas overlooking the bay up the side streets. It's like a town right out of Murder, She Wrote or a Steinbeck novel. It should be a glistening jewel overlooking the bay. Once the day of the party arrived, we were ready. I gave a warm and hearty presentation showing off my client's vision of what Anchor Bay will be like on a spring day in 1948. The crowd was enthralled. A mix of family members, friends who knew industrial and railroad history, and small kids asked a bunch of great questions to keep the event going. Delighted by running the passenger train, everybody in that moment was imagining they were riding that little SP officer's special up through the scenery of coastal California. Moments like this really make it wonderful to spend my days building model railroads for clients. To think that 2 episodes ago it was an empty room, and now it's well on its way to becoming a time machine back to a beautiful place along the Northern California coast. That's pretty remarkable. Stay tuned for more episodes of Anchor Bay. I've already shot more of it, and we'll be adding some more scenery atop these landforms and bringing the buildings into the town and on the layout to life. A special thanks to my patrons for making a big difference in being able to dedicate time to editing these videos. Remember, the more support you can spare me, the more time I can dedicate to polishing each and every one of these videos even more. If you're interested in hiring me to build your next layout, there's a link in the description. Until next time, this has been Interurban Era. Have fun, and I look forward to your comments and questions below.